Hello everyone and welcome back. It's Jessalyn. Today I have planned a journey through the history and expression of glamour. We're going to look at glamour specifically through the perfume bottle. So the design of what holds beautiful, sensual scents. Okay? So we're going to be looking at and hearing all the amazing sounds that these little perfume decanters make. Okay. But while we do, we're also going to look at photographs and history present in this book called Glamour Icons by Mark Rosen, a famous designer. And this is all about how the design of perfume bottles happened, what inspired them, who the major players are, and what the trends are in the field, in this particular art form. So, to think about perfume, of which I don't wear very often. The only one I wear out of all of these is Gucci Flora. I love this one. I don't know if you can see. And I prefer the roll-on, so I never spray perfume. But mine favorite is Gucci. It's, again, as it sounds, it's Flora. So I like the floral kind of girly scents, which, as you learn, as we read, really was emblematic of the early aughts, when girlhood really came in style. Like, you'll notice now so much of the products created for women feel like they're created for a high school girl. I don't know why that is, but there's just this youthfulness that's come out, probably from the amount of media like Taylor Swift, the kind of ubiquity of young adult novels. It seems like all of our music, everything is geared towards a high school girl at the moment. And so the same goes with perfume at the time now. So much of it is girly, kind of put towards the younger woman rather than an elegant, austere, older woman who would have been marketed to in the 1910s, 1900s, 1920s, 1930s, early 20th century. So that's just a little shift. That's in what I personally wear. All of these other bottles are from an antique store. So these are not perfumes that I would wear. Other than this one, Tender Romance, is a perfume of mine that I never wear because it gives me a headache. So, scent is used to express the intangible. If you think about your brain, we know that the olfactory mode of our brain is deeply connected to memory. So when you smell, you remember, right? It will bring all of these different memories upon you. But you'll notice that we don't have words for smells, not like we have words for sight. Every word for smell is some kind of metaphor. So if I say floral, I'm telling you to think of the smell of a flower. I'm not telling you a specific smell. You have to really think about flower smell, right? It's metaphorical. This smells like a flower. It is a floral smell, right? When we think of sight, we have mountain, right? Mountain is not metaphor. There's literally a mountain, right? But with scents, it's different. We don't have words to describe scents. They're so intangible. And that's why scent exists in the ambiguous. It exists in the ineffable and the difficult to express. And it's really because our brains, the visual center of our brain, is highly associated with the language center of our brain. So we have a very vision-centered language, visual-centered language. We don't have an olfactory-centered language. If we were to be rewired, I wonder what would happen to our language if we were to express ourselves according to smell. That would be a fascinating language to perceive, where we had words for the smells of things rather than the look of things. Someone really ought to come up with that. But that is why when we think about perfume, we're thinking about the intangible, an essence, essentially, a thing that you can perceive but cannot see. The bottle, however, is the tangible portion of the intangible. So you see why the bottle becomes so important. You have a scent. How do you sell a scent? You can't smell it. You sell it in a bottle. You sell it with a structure, right? Like this one. That should let us know what this scent invokes or evokes. Okay? So this is essentially, in the 20th century, what would encapsulate the identity of the fashion house that was producing it. Throughout the 20th century, we don't have a lot of celebrity-inspired perfumes. Now we have J.Lo's scents, Kim Kardashian's scents, Britney Spears' scents, Paris Hilton's scents. But back in the day, they came from designers, from designer houses. Balenciaga had scents. Think about Dior was the big one. Chanel, obviously Chanel No. 5, the most famous and well-known perfume, which we'll discuss. One of the first of its kind, really. All of these bottles were intended to represent the fashion house. And so that is what we're looking at. The bottle, the sense of the bottle, as we can see here, this is a bit kitschy. But anyway, it's intended to reflect the scientific notes of the perfume and the this is just to think about how we talk about, again, scent. The notes of a perfume are, again, not olfactory, right? That's hearing, right? Notes, musical notes. So there's a sonorous sense. What alliteration. What euphony. But there's a sonorous sense to our discussion or the way we talk about perfume, right? We think about the notes. They're like a song. They're an ineffable song, something you experience briefly and then it goes away. Very difficult to capture. Okay? Now, people have been working with smells for so long, but interestingly enough, the capturing of smell began really with religious, for religious purposes. So perfume began as a religious gift to the gods, to communicate and receive favors from the gods. You can also think about the Catholic Mass with the incense. And the incense is intended to be the prayers of the faithful rising up to God, to hear them, to the angels above and the saints and so on. So that is really how perfume began, as a highly religious, really divine experience. As far back as 1400 BC, in dynastic Egypt even, people were already creating scents and putting them, more specifically, in specifically designed bottles to hold them. So the 1400 BC, we're already seeing this art, not only of scent, but of the bottle that holds the scent. Again, this one's a bit silly, it's a little wagging. And there's actually scent in it. I don't know how bad it must smell. Oh, Lord Almighty. That's intense. Okay. I don't even know how to describe what that was to you. And we'll learn why in a second when we talk about how perfumes are made now. They're not really grounded in any natural sense that we're used to anymore. They're becoming more and more abstract as they become more interested in chemistry. Okay. Now, how, for instance, these perfumes would be made. I'm getting ahead of myself. Maybe I should stop. Let me go back to glamour first. So I said that this would be about primarily glamour and the evolution of glamour. And I want you to think about what comes to mind when you hear glamour. I think in the magazine, but I also think Marilyn Monroe. I think she's the really big one. Everyone kind of thinks about Marilyn. But how glamour began is actually as trickery, as deceit. So glamour, to be glamorous, was to create a beautiful self, one that would deceive. And there's so much historical grounding. You think about the deception of the sirens, but also if you think about fairy tales and myths, or like Irish fairy tales, glamour is the thing that fairies would put on to conceal their hideousness. So they could glamour things, essentially completely change the visible aspects of them. So glamour, again, is all about deception, deceiving. But in the 18th century, this deception became a very powerful tool as social classes began to dissolve, largely because of industrialization, people moving to cities. You have, with that urban life, more social mobility. Everyone's kind of smushed together. The private and the public becomes less simple to distinguish. Everyone's in close quarters. At that point, beauty can be used for the purposes of social mobility. You can glamour yourself. You can appear to be one of the upper class when you are actually not. Appearance can be used to affect your social standing. And so glamour so much is from that. You take the small, rough person like Marilyn Monroe, an orphan, and you turn her into the most important woman in the world, right? Simply by adjusting and creating an illusion, an appearance that is not really her own. I think that behind glamour, right, there needs to be some sort of roughness, some sort of kind of wink to say all of this beauty conceals something quite real, something a little bit more dangerous, right? So I do think that glamour does have that to an aspect in it. So it is performance, but it's a performance that conceals the truth, and the fact that it conceals gives it a sense of mystery, the glamorous woman. And that's why so many of our glamour icons, like Marilyn Monroe, are sad. And part of that sadness, that roughness, that brokenness is what draws you in. A brokenness concealed by the illusion of wholeness. So that's kind of how I see glamour. But think of deception and how scent is so much about that deception. Okay? Covering up the natural, something different. Okay. So let's see, where do we go next? I think we'll now work through the book a little bit, and I'll bring these up when I have to. So we're going to flip through the book now, and I'm going to move these to the side. And put them in a little line. And we're going to go through the different eras from 1910 all the way up to close to now, but not now, through this big, beautiful book that I have here. And we'll also do some flipping through these notes that I've taken. We'll go to 1910, and we'll pop there in my book here. Let's see. There's so much. This kind of goes into what I was talking about with glamour. And this is actually the cover. So, as you can see here, this is the image of the fan, and the fan was used as a method of flirtation. And with fans, there's actually a whole method, a whole language that ladies had with the different movements, how much they open them, to tell a man if she was interested or not, play little flirtation games. And so this KL, a very famous perfume by a very famous designer. His name was, of course I can't remember, Lagerfeld, I think. Karl Lagerfeld. Karl Lagerfeld, or Lagerfeld. Oh, it's right there, Lagerfeld. a very famous designer who notably walked around with a fan. He had a very androgynous look, kind of blended the female and the masculine together. But this is glamour, right? Deception, concealment, concealing everything but the eyes, right? That's flirtation. Flirtation is about mystery. It's about not knowing. It's about an exciting future that you must discover. So that's what that is to me. So I'll pause there. I'm going to bring down the book in a second. We could start comparing design for women's perfumes and design for men's perfumes before we go. Like this one. Is this a men's perfume or women's? I can't remember. This one is definitely a men's perfume. The Burberry for Men. And then we have women's perfume, which is so much more feminine. This is an Elizabeth Arden bottle. So I'll show you this one real quick. We might start with this. Elizabeth Arden. Yeah, so I found Elizabeth Arden. I think she's a great place to start before we go into those decades, because she really represented the 20th century elegance and dominated that field for pretty much the entirety of the 20th century. And so this is the one we'll look at first. Then we'll compare the Burberry perfume, which is definitely a male design. We'll compare these feminine designs versus the male. But here is Elizabeth Arden. Those of you who remember her salons, I think a few still exist, will remember, or in this style rather, they still have the red doors. The Elizabeth Arden salons were exclusive. They were expensive. They were difficult to access. You had to be a certain type of woman in order to get into them. And so this perfume bottle Mark Rosen designed to resemble a door. And this door, this perfume, was just like the 18th century kind of use of glamour to change your class. This door pulls from that, saying that this perfume is a key to an exclusive world, one behind the red door that exists in the Elizabeth Arden salon. Now, let's go to everything about Elizabeth Arden. She's a fascinating story. We have to zoom back a little bit in order to get there. Okay. So Elizabeth Arden was founded by Elizabeth Arden in 1908. She kind of reminds me a bit of a Martha Stewart character, one who was creating a dynasty based off of female perfection and the pursuit of female perfection. Martha Stewart obviously in the home, Elizabeth Arden in appearance, elegance, stature. So she popularized makeup for the waspy woman, which would be me. I am very Puritan by heritages, you know, straight off the Mayflower kind of person. So Elizabeth Arden would have been, you know, kind of geared towards women like me if I had lived in the early 1900s. You know, very like Massachusetts Concord area. And still to this day in Massachusetts, this kind of elegant waspy woman does not wear makeup. It's kind of considered trashy to wear makeup. My mother doesn't wear makeup at all, and whenever I wear it, she's very disturbed. So Elizabeth Arden popularized makeup for the very elegant, sophisticated woman who would never wear makeup, right? So she went to a very elite clientele, a clientele that would have kind of issued the makeup thing. And she created so many different perfumes and so many different styles of bottle. There were some that were very classy, particularly what they would call Oriental at the time. With, for instance, this design here. This was based off of the, what was it? Let's look at the Brighton Pavilion. So the Royal Brighton Pavilion is what this is based off of. Bottles like this. They were created in these nice packaging so that men could buy them. And so the Elizabeth Arden time was very particular because originally with scents were part of the flirtation, part of courting. So men would buy scents for women. Women wouldn't buy their own scents, and they really didn't start buying their own scents until the introduction of, for instance, Charlie. And we'll talk about Charlie, a scent that was made for the independent woman, a woman who chooses her own perfume. But in the time of Elizabeth Arden, men would choose the perfume for their woman. Okay, but Elizabeth Arden began to play with that concept with the Red Door, this perfume designed for women. An independent woman who chooses her own scents, who chooses her own, jewelry. She buys things for herself. Her image is created and curated for herself by herself, right? So the Red Door is definitely a big moment in perfume. Charlie is by Revlon, and that was a more open, kind of rustic, do-it-yourself, really not feminine, not a lot of floral notes in that, or any floral notes in Charlie. But Red Door is different. It's not as in-your-face independent woman as the other one was. So I'm seeing if I can find where we talk about Elizabeth Arden. Here we go. This is a really good page all about her. Soon I'll flip the camera around, but for now I'm just holding it up. So this is Elizabeth Arden. As you can see, she's a very certain type of woman in the early 20th century that would live. And this is her perfume called Bluegrass, which is actually based off of her Lexington, Kentucky horse farm, I believe. It's supposed to be very girly, kind of wild, the wild rustic girl running around in the woods kind of thing was this scent. You can see that there's the horse on the top. So this is a really good example of a perfume bottle that attempts to encapsulate the scent inside it, right? So it's trying to communicate to you, this is elegant but wild, right? You get the elegance, the sophistication of the Elizabeth Arden with this really superior bottle, but then you have the horse, right? This artistic horse and this really bold label going down, just that bold stripe saying Bluegrass, right? So that is very much the combination of wild, rustic, southern, whatever, plus the sophistication of Elizabeth Arden, of the waspy Puritan woman. So that's a great way to connect them, okay? So, men. Let's go to Burberry. Right. Burberry is very different. How is perfume made for men? Okay. So compare that feminist Red Door venture into the expensive world of Elizabeth Arden, compare it to Burberry for men. Now, Burberry is a designer we all know. Now, it really wasn't popular until 1997 when it was transformed into more of a fashion house. Before, it was really just an English men's outfitter, and it was founded in 1856, and they were really known for this rain jacket that some of you may remember. I don't. But they were known for this rain jacket, had like a checkered inside, and everyone knew it. And that's really all they were known for. And unfortunately, rain jackets are only so useful in places that rain, so a lot. So Burberry had a very limited consumer base, essentially, until it was turned into that big fashion house, and now it's on like Newbury Street in Boston, and everywhere. But here we have Mark Rosen was designing a perfume bottle for men, and look at how it's designed. So much different than the one for women. This was designed to look like a book. Okay, so it has the curved back and the strong book binding here. Sorry, the binding here, and the pages would be here. And it also had the look of a flask. So they wanted to combine these two masculine images, that of a flask and that of a book. And then they had this offset opening for the spritzer, or whatever it's called. So this is a very male, and you can see how different it is. The instead of a red door entering into this place of beauty, you have a book, right, based on knowledge, work, culture, so on and so forth. So you really see how people felt about men. This was in the 1970s, I want to say, that this came out. Let me look. 1981. Very different. There was also a lot of grenade imagery in our perfume, particularly this one, Kaiser Call. These, so much like a grenade. You see that? You have the pin that you pull, and you can hold it in your hand. It fits in your hand, and you throw it. So you're going to see, as we flip this book, a lot of grenade imagery. So pay attention to that, because that's some fascinating stuff too. Okay, but yeah, war, books, learning, work, drinking, all of that is really men. Women, flirty, classic, elegant, exclusive, all of that. Men's perfumes always feel less exclusive than women's. Exclusivity is such a feminine concept, and I don't really know why. I think we'll have to think about that. Maybe the exclusivity, it feels exclusive, how many roles there really are for women. Like, you only have a few choices, especially at this time, before women could even have their own credit card. So, yeah. Well, not this time, not the 80s, but, the 60s and 50s. Okay. So, why don't we get started and zoom right to the 1910s. Oh my God. And I'm going to turn the camera around so you can really see. I want you to be able to see what we're looking at. I want you to see the details of it, because these are really beautiful pictures. So I just need to find my way to it. There's awesome. Shanghai. I don't want that. Where am I? Okay. Let me turn it around and then we'll find it. Okay, first we're looking at Chanel No. 5. We all know Chanel No. 5 very well. The reason we're starting with it, even though it's not one of the first perfumes, is to show us some of the changes that the 20th century saw in the production of perfume. Chanel No. 25 or No. 5 was the 1920s. We're thinking flapper era, right, is when this perfume arrived. It has the No. 5 name, a very specific quantity, not something flowery and romantic. And it was a serious package, just a little bottle with a white label and the black numbering. So very different than what we're going to see when we look at the 1910s. Now, the reason I'm starting with this first is because this is one of the first perfumes made in that chemical style with aldehydes, making scent a more abstract form of art, no longer beholden to the sense of nature. Chanel No. 5 is often considered the first. It was not the first to be made with aldehydes. There were many more that came before in the 1910s, I think as early as 1905. But this was really the most famous one to use these different chemicals. The older way of extracting scent was this, and this is why I want to bring us to it, because the bottles we're going to look at in the 1910s were probably still pulling from this historical method of extracting scent. Affleurage, where flowers like jasmine or orange blossoms, their petals would be soaked in lard, and the lard would actually extract the fragrance. So that's the older way that Chanel No. 5 then replaced with the aldehydes, with this more chemical process where we could manipulate scents without having any natural original bearing on them. So that's what we see there. I just wanted to start with that. But we'll now turn to the 1910s, where you're going to see much less of the kind of minimalist Chanel No. 5. Keep going. All of these different pictures. Did I go too far? Can't remember what page 1910 is on. Nope. Go back even more. We're in the 1930s now. Sorry, it was kind of an unpleasant sound. In the 1930s, get to there we go. Here we are, the 1910s. The 1910s, okay, is where the modern perfume bottle is started. Now, Virginia Woolf famously wrote, on or about December 1910, human character changed. So he says it was the year before with the introduction of the ballet, which created a kind of cultural tsunami throughout the world. Certainly the Western world. But in 1910, we see this man named Lalique. I think he's the most important. Lalique was a celebrated jeweler, but he didn't make jewels like we would expect people to make. When you think about the Queen's crown, for instance, and all these like very rare and valuable jewels, and everything is made to amplify these. He was very different. He liked to use glass, colored stones, enamel, things like that, to create his own images. And they were always based usually on natural imagery, flowers, insects, fish, reptiles. So you can think about him, unlike Chanel No. 5, really pulling from the actual world in which we live. And so he was incorporating very sculptural elements in his jewelry. This is one of the perfume bottles he designed, and you can see the emphasis on the glass here, but also these very beautiful designs here. It looks like it's a woman. Let's find out. When he lost interest in jewelry, he began to design bottles for perfume. And this is when we really had the first of its kind in modern age of a perfume specifically, a bottle specifically designed to suggest the scent it contained. Le Fleur, I don't know French, I think it's Le Fleur, suggests both a flower and to touch lightly or even to slightly wound. And so he made a rectangular glass relief, right, which is right here, with the image of a woman swirling through a cloud of smoke and petals. So very much the image of the flower petal being soaked in lard that I was speaking of. You pull everything from the flower petal, but also the smoke is so interesting because if we think about the religious imagery that we're discussing, smoke is the prayers reaching God. So there's so much tradition in this bottle, even in its somewhat woodsy, magical creation. So it's made by Baccarat, and Baccarat was in France kind of a crystal glass house that would produce these. Because these are not easy to produce, and especially you can think they're not easy to mass produce. But this was the first modern commercial perfume bottle, right? We turn now to some other pictures from the 1910s. You're going to see, this is another Lalique, a very similar attention to the female form. This is Ambre Antique, resembling an Athenian alabastron, a container for perfumed oil. So you have a frieze of a classically draped maiden, something that might have been pulled from an archaeological dig. Again, very different than Chanel No. 5. We're thinking about the classical elements. We're thinking about the romantic period with the flowers and the beauty, sensuality, things like that. And then over here, we have one with its very iconic heart-shaped top here. And go, again, flowery, beautiful. 1910 sees the entrance of the fashion house into the perfume world. Perfume is ordinarily sold up until now in special perfume houses. And I actually was hired to work at one of these perfume houses where perfumes would be mixed for you. You'd get your own original scent and they would be poured into these little crystal decanters. The closest I think I have to what you might get is this, right? I keep going to this one because it's my favorite and it has all of these nice, designs. You can take it out and see. Nothing is in it, but it would be put in kind of a nondescript glass vial for you. This one's not very nondescript. This has got a lot of design to it. But that's how you get your perfume, and I ended up not working there because it closed, as most did, because these commercial perfumes took over. So that is kind of how the 1910s began to change the way that perfume was sold. Now it's sold in fashion houses, and you have these pre-designed perfumes, these pre-designed packages arising. Okay. You also saw in this time a great deal of French, right? The French were dominating the fashion market, and they were also dominating the perfume market. So French, French, French all the time, as you can see. But also we have so much insect imagery, and even our darling Lalique would depict women having insect wings. So much of women being little flying insects. So here's the butterfly you see here. Okay. Let's turn the page. This one now takes us to the 1920s. right? So here we are. This is a perfume display, okay, in 1925 in Paris. And so of the 1920s, the word that I would describe would be eternal youth, living in the present, all of these kinds of terms. So we see the return to the present moment, particularly after World War I, destroyed, as he says, the order of things that had only the day before seemed eternal. So the way of life had vanished. And so there was, let's see, how would I describe this? There was just like a shift in the way that fashion works. You have the flapper, right? And Paris becoming the capital of the Jazz Age. Fashion would celebrate youth rather than the elegance, the romanticism, the classical that we were seeing in 1910s. We're seeing the origin of a youthful present. One cannot believe in the future, one cannot believe in the past. So what do you do? The life of the present. And the life of the present is so often caught in the young woman, the young man. So this is when Chanel number 5 arrives, and it's no surprise. After World War I, you have this very concrete number given for this, not something ambiguous like Le Fleur, nothing like that. And you have a very chemically produced perfume with very little grounding in nature. So the plain would make sense. And perfume bottles are now really designed like that for the most part. You have here, is this Chanel? Who is this? Tender Romance. Oh, Ralph Lauren. Ralph Lauren. You can have, it's very similar to the Chanel number 5 bottle, almost exact, right? You have the white label with the words across it and this square glass. I'll take it off. I can tell you what it smells like. We'll see. I can't even remember. It's very like vanilla. I love vanilla. It's one of my favorite scents, so I usually get things that are very vanilla-like. This was a gift. I was not the independent woman buying my own perfume in this case. Sorry, that was really loud. Okay, so over here we have a glass elephant, kind of a youthful, enchanting miniature sculpture. Perfume bottles would take on the shape of things. So let's pull this over so you can see. I love this one. He's like a little chess piece. You could put him on a board game. So here we have, this is the glass elephant by Baccarat, a turbaned man riding on his elephant, his massive, oversized elephant. And look how the light is hitting the gold. It's just so spectacular. And this was based on a play by Edward Knobloch. Kismet is the name of the perfume. And Kismet, I'll show you, actually means, take out my yellow leaf. Look how many notes. Oh my gosh. It's absurd. Fate, predestined love, the certainty of the present, right? So Kismet is all about having a predestined love that you can believe in, right? So at a time of uncertainty, this really focuses on the present. The present is certain. The future's not so much, but the present is certain. You can count on the present. So it gives you that certainty that the love that is here is real, is true, is fated. And that is this 1920s there. Let's turn it over now. This is my favorite of the perfume bottles. Just look at how it's photographed as if the light is emanating from the bottle. This perfume bottle comes with a story. This was created by Jean Lanvin, and she was a famous fashion designer who belonged to the House of Lanvin. And she grew up as a little girl with a poor mother who was a concierge. And at 9 years old, she was apprenticed to a milliner. And those who don't know milliner, like this, I have a friend who is a milliner, or trying to be hat maker. She's apprenticed to a hat maker, and she dressed her daughter. She was apprenticed to a milliner, and she was very young. And when she got married very young and had a young daughter very early. And she would dress her child in these beautiful dresses, and people would see them and they would beg her to make some for her, for their children and for them. So she really kind of happened into the fashion world based on that, designing clothes for her daughter. Her daughter was her window into success. And so she had a very, very famous fashion house. And in the 1920s, right, they began offering perfume for themselves. And it's based off of this bottle, a picture in 1904 of Madame Lanvin and her 7-year-old daughter dressed for a costume ball. So it's really, really beautiful. He describes it as very remote. These two are alone in a black sea, a kind of black abyss. So in that way, it is very isolated. But I find it to be just a very elegant, beautiful bottle with a nice story behind it. Now this one here is based off Commedia dell'arte, which was hugely inspirational in the 1920s. Commedia dell'arte was 17th century, 18th century theater in Italy. It was both scripted and improvised, and actually had the first female actresses in history, women being in plays as early as the 1550s. So that's exciting about Commedia dell'arte. This is based off the figure of Harlequin. Now, Harlequin was a comedic servant. He wore checkered clothing, and so this one attempts to mimic that checkered clothing. And he had a black hat. So there's his black hat. And it usually had some sort of raccoon tail, and so you can see the tail of his hat there. And he was in love with Columbine, the mistress servant, who was very smart and deceptive. And so Harlequin ended up winning her, even though Perrault was also in love with her. But Perrault was very sad, wishy-washy, so he didn't win. Harlequin did, because he was a trickster type, and he won the heart of Columbine. But anyway, that's the 20s. Let's move on from the 20s now. More 20s. You can just look at the pictures for a second, but move a bit more quickly. Here we are in the 30s. The Great Depression, stock market crash, all of that. You think that it would destroy the perfume industry, but actually it heralded in the golden age of perfume, the golden age of glamour. Why? Well, first of all, glamour is about deception, about pretending you're rich when you're not. So there's a big one. But also Hollywood. The rise of Hollywood film stars really buffered up the perfume industry and their pretty little bottles. That kind of elegance, goddess-like elegance, really, that the film industry created. And movies at the time were so artificial. The type of acting that you see in the 30s and the 40s has a very focus on artifice. We know of the artifice. It's not like now when we're really meant to believe that it's true, and we have a very kind of Marlon Brando-esque form of acting. Marlon Brando really heralded in the form of acting that we have now, which is very realistic. He embodies the character. Before Marlon Brando, acting was all about artifice, an affected way of speaking, an affected way of acting. There was a great deal of glamour and clear deception in each of the characters. So these women spoke in very artificial ways. And the good thing about artifice is you can take it, right? If something's fake, if it's not natural, if it's not part of who someone is, then you can take it and you can wear it. So you could don the character of a film star, film actress, by imitating the way she speaks, imitating how she smells, how she looks, doing her, grand makeup, and so on and so forth. So artifice glamour is at its height, its zenith in the 1930s, believe it or not, even though we have poverty in massive quantities. Here's Normandy, made for the passengers of the Normandy, a ocean liner in 1935. Now here is my favorite, and I actually have a perfume bottle in this style, so I'll get it. This is the skyscraper style. Look at that. Look at the architecture of this. You have your little stopper here. You see this skyscraper, almost pyramid, jagged lines, almost exactly like this one here. So this is very much a perfume bottle in the 1930s design, and it is antique. I don't know from when, but it is an antique perfume bottle. But this Art Deco skyscraper style over here, Opening Night, is a perfume from 1935 that emblemizes the skyscraper. And so 1930s, we have such a focus on enormous buildings, architectural accomplishment. And so we'll see a lot of that here in the 1930s in the structure. You also have the height here, Indiscret, which is a tall bell-like shape with curtains falling over it like a statue before its unveiling. So very, very beautiful. But my favorite perfume bottle is certainly this one, right? Very black, reminds me of Ayn Rand. Everything reminds me of Ayn Rand. I don't know why I like her so much, I really shouldn't. But there you go. Just also the Hyatt in Boston, on Charles. It reminds me of the Hyatt on the Charles in Boston. That's what that is. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Oh, this one's fantastic. Shocking. More and more architectural bottles, but let's go to shocking. Okay. And this one you have The Return of the Repressed, as it's called. But this is surrealist in nature. As you can see, the head of this bodice, of this body here, is replaced with flowers and dreams. So it's a very surreal perfume bottle. Schiaparelli, I don't know how to pronounce these things. But it's very Victorian in nature, with the dressmaker's dummy here. And then where the head should be is only dreams. It's very youthful, very focused on the youth, and just very pretty. And the bright, bright pink, really beautiful. Right, we have more. We'll just take a look at the pictures. This is the Carnegie bottle. Greek sculpture, African mask. You have hands. This is quite a bottle, huh? Can imagine all of them sitting on a makeup table is where they go. And now the 1940s. Sin and... what is this called? Saint and Sinner bottles. One white, one black. All right. The 1940s. The post-war collection. Post-World War, we return to romantic opulence. Okay. We have Balenciaga, who arises. So let's look at the opulence of these. This one is really great. This is an Elizabeth Arden. We've talked about her. These are supposed to resemble gossiping ladies. So, On Dit is what it's called. It's kind of based off of the film The Women, or resembles it, The Women of 1939, where female friends exchange rumors about each other's straying husbands and lovers while shopping at the beauty salon. So all about gossip and conversation among women. And then over here, this is a beautiful one, just for its boldness of lines and color. You have the yellow perfume and that bold blue outline. This is really fantastic. Okay, we're only going to stay here for a moment. But Dior's rival arrives, which is Balenciaga. That one's really exceptional with the opening in the middle. Here's our Balenciaga. 1947 is his perfume. Then you have Dior over here. Oh, you can't see. I'll show you Dior. These two are rivaling perfumes. I don't know which you prefer. Let's continue on. Again, the romanticism, the quill, something for writing love letters. This is a love letter perfume. As you can see, it's an ink well filled with scent. Oh, this one I love. I did it because this is a woman's bottom with her dress or her skirt pulled around her ankles. It fell right off. So it's very, as you can see, cheeky romanticism is certainly back. We're getting a little bit risque in what we get away with. Now we move into the 50s, which is where I really wanted to go, because this, talk about the epitome of Hollywood. We have here perfumes that are going to be inspired with really the height of glamour, with Marilyn Monroe, Arlene Dahl, Grace Kelly, Elizabeth Taylor, Ava Gardner, all of these people. I have a great picture of a perfume bottle inspired by Marilyn. If I can find it, let me see. It's on page 19, so we're just going to go back real quick all the way to page 19. Come with me. Where is it? Here we are. There's Marilyn Monroe. This perfume bottle is designed to resemble the slit in the front of her dress all the way down. Right, so her figure is so inspiring to these architectural creations. This is the Marilyn perfume bottle in 1999. She was so lasting, her because her glamour was, because she was sad. I think she was lasting because she was sad. But we can debate that. Okay, she was sad and she was innocent but not innocent. Paradox in that way. So, she was, I think, always in the position of being let down. And there's something about that. Every man could imagine being the person who didn't let her down, maybe. I don't know. So this is the height of glamour. So we'll see the most glamorous images, most deceptive. Oh, look at this. This one is truly beautiful. I love this one. This is Diorismo by Dior in 1956, created, of course, by Baccarat. We have here another Dior. Oh no, we're in the 1960s. I'm sorry. Went too far. Okay. This is Elizabeth Arden's Memoir Chérie. Okay. Of the 1950s. 1960s. Civil rights movement, right? Jackie Kennedy. The French has a revival. Now, after World War II, the French kind of popped off for a second because they were invaded, obviously, or occupied by Hitler. And so they kind of lost their notoriety. But in the 1960s, the French come rearing back in the United States, particularly because Jackie Kennedy comes along. What a fashion icon she is. She really took away the or the 50s, frou-frou, where this focus on romantic and drippy and, overly emotional, whatever. And she pulled in this very austere elegance, very much the WASP, right? We think about Boston Catholic Kennedys, it makes sense. So we have a wave of rebellion, but also this combination of what we would call simplicity, where glamour and elegance collide, is what I have written down here. Glamour and elegance collide. 166, the chamade, or chamade, I'm not really sure. Let's go to it. There, this one. Love this. Right, chamade means the drums of surrender, but this one implies the drums of surrender to love. Okay. But let's go to the 70s. I'm going to try and go through so this video isn't terribly long. This is where I think we're getting to my favorite perfume bottles. I tend to like the very severe architectural ones with strong lines. I know what other people think, but those are the ones I like. This is the 1970s. We have the development of very masculine, the mixing of the masculine and the feminine, particularly for women, right? We see suddenly this very dark, harsh lines. There's a focus on hedonism, the collision of the proper and the perverse. It's an elegance that's sexy and dangerous. We lose the strict simplicity. We have just glamour and violence, right? That comes out of the civil rights movement in the 1960s. We have, for instance, Saint Laurent putting a woman in a man's suit with a transparent blouse under her smoking jacket. So women are gender bending, but they also are maintaining that sexuality. That's a little bit dangerous, a little bit hedonistic. Hedonism being enjoying the pleasures of life. Very Marlon Brando and Streetcar Named Desire, if we're having a Marlon Brando day. That kind of hedonism. And so here we have, if I look at this one, Vivre, to live. Zigzags across the large stopper remind us of the peaks and valleys traced by the needle of an EKG, the rhythm of life itself. The lower edge of the bottle repeats this in irregular jacket pattern. So this is feminism at its height, but also hedonism and feminism kind of wrapped up into one. It's interesting. Oscar de la Renta, we all know here. Let's see that. this one here. A vase filled with a large flower. This one was intended to resemble Oscar de la Renta's couture gowns. Now we're getting more to our time period, and our time period is a little sad in a lot of ways. 1980s. The 1980s is a big shift. This is materialism, right? The hedonism of the 70s ends, and we have the materialism, go big or go home, buy the most. If you have the money, spend it. You have Dynasty and Danielle Steele at this time, Dynasty the show. Perfumes are loud and brash and in your face. Excess is good. It's a sign of status, so you want to be as big as you can, like the Texas era of perfume. And so it's all about excess. Nancy Reagan brings the West Coast to the East Coast when she becomes First Lady. And you have all of these very bold styles. I mean, look at this one. Gianni Versace right here. You have this one called Diva, this like yellow, this weird egg yolk one, which is supposed to look like the solar system, but just looks like an egg yolk by Paloma Picasso, which is the daughter of Picasso, designed this one. I'll keep looking. This one, of course. This is Bijan, which is an Iranian-American designer who created this amazing perfume bottle. I absolutely love it. This one is gorgeous. It's a puzzle. When it is half full, each ring contains liquid. There you go. And these are like fascinating designs as well. Let's learn. We're going to move back now. After excess, we boomerang back to minimalism. 1989 sees the fall of the Berlin Wall. There are some who would say that the 21st century began in the 90s, not in the 2000s. And so here we have the return to minimalism. You can see this. This is your Dazzling Gold by Estee Lauder in 1998. Again, minimalist in nature. But here we are in the 2000s, and this is closer to where we are today. And I want to stop on this one because if we remember with the male perfume, the Grenade, do you remember the Grenade? This is a Grenade too, but it's for women now. So all of that 1980 or 1970s hedonism, the woman is sexual but dangerous, really comes to a head here in the 2000s with this balm that's pink and soft rose gold, but looks like it can explode. Like you have the pin here for the Grenade and you have the shape and these little dots. So sensuality, but danger lurking behind. So that kind of thing I said about glamour being deception, hiding something dangerous, rustic, unrefined. That is the epitome of that right here. The glamour of our time is the glamour that hides the danger. We also see Juicy Couture, of course. Couture. We all remember Juicy. How ridiculous that was. But the 2000s saw the return of excess, and perhaps we haven't really left it. The Wall Street boom, which we know will end in a crash, but saw the rise of fast fashion, and that's why Juicy Couture is, I think, so important. Juicy became such a fast fashion label. So you see the genders mixing. Women and men's products are taking on more and more qualities of each other, but also we're having styles and trends move very, very quickly. You have H&M, you have Zara, all of these places that are now arriving and putting out fashions in a matter of a week. So what happens to perfume? What happens to bottles? What happens to art? when you have such a rapid turnover. I think we're all asking ourselves that now. I'm not sure. And every single discipline in the artistic world needs to ask themselves that. I think we're actually at the height of it. We have more creators, more avenues towards creation than ever before. But in the perfume industry, it does feel as if something is lost. This is Calvin Klein Beauty. It's just so boring. Mass production needs to be produced quickly, needs to be produced in huge quantities, right? So you create something simple. You can't go for the ornate that you used to be able to go for with like the French Crystal House producing the bottles. It's not happening anymore, right? So we lose a lot to mass production, I would say. But I want to end on a quote. So I'll go to a quote. It's one of my favorite quotes that I've encountered so far, and I found it in this book, of all things. And it's talking about like the death of things and how we try and keep things alive with objects, like bringing back, for instance, the flapper dress, or bringing back the styles of the 80s. So this is from Proust, of course. When a belief vanishes, there survives a fetishistic attachment to the old things which it did once animate, as if it was in them and not in ourselves that the divine spark resided. So we look to take the thing that the person created, but we can never exemplify or revive the person who created the thing. Did the thing create the person and create the culture, or did the culture create the thing? I think that's why when we look at revivals, they feel sometimes empty. I'm like, we're reviving because we have no culture of our own, we have no production of our own. And so now, particularly in music, we have such a kind of a revival, a resurgence of past, for instance, 80s music, 80s styles, 80s music styles. It feels empty to me. Much like Proust is saying, just like with these perfume bottles, the ones that are extraordinary are the ones that are building something new out of their time. The objects aren't stolen from the past. So I think now is a particularly good time. I feel like the world has shifted in a kind of radical way, that it had been shifting, but the shift is now complete. And so now is the time for new art to come. Art that we have not seen before. I think the time of reviving the sounds of the past is over, and we're going to see new sounds arise, and I'm curious to see what they will be. But looking through those time periods, you can see how art fluctuates, and this is through something very small, right? The perfume bottle. Did you have perfume bottles like this one? Like little nostalgic perfume bottles that bring back the carriage, right? But I don't really know why. You know, you turn past into an object and you hold the object in your hands. Doesn't mean you can reach the past. It doesn't mean you can become the person that created it. I don't know. It's, always good to end on Proust. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I know it's another long video. I can't seem to do a short one. But yeah, thank you for joining me. I had fun, and I hope you have a wonderful sleep, wonderful rest. All right. Night, night, everyone. Bye-bye.